Most people see salt merely as something to sprinkle on their food, an everyday condiment so common we rarely pause to think about its origins or deeper implications. Do you know that salt carries a mysterious aura that transcends its culinary use? Some cultures valued it as highly as gold, entire wars were fought over it, and civilizations rose to prominence based on their capacity to harvest and trade it. Sprinkling salts around your house opens the door to unbelievable streams of blessings. This simple act of sprinkling salt in our home has so much spiritual and physical significance that many believers have continuously overlooked. But today, we will tear down the curtains and reveal the mysterious powers of salt, why you should sprinkle it around your home, and how to do so. From ancient Middle Eastern rituals to modern-day Christian observances, salt has served as a symbol of purity, covenant, and preservation. Adding to the intrigue are rumors and speculations that sprinkling salt around your living space can protect your home, usher in blessings, and restore tranquility. While this might sound like a superstition, millions worldwide have embraced salt as a tangible conduit for faith and positivity. It's not just about keeping ghosts at bay. For some, it's about tapping into a divine promise that transcends time. From household cleaning hacks to deodorizing musty corners, a few pinches of salt can enhance your home life in more ways than one. Yet these mundane benefits only scratch the surface. When you look deeper, you'll discover that salt has proven to be one of the most potent symbols for spiritual refreshment, linked to several biblical passages that carry timeless lessons. The question then arises, could an everyday mineral hold the key to a richer, more encouraging perspective on faith? If you're curious about how sprinkling salt could shift the entire atmosphere of your home, or if you're simply looking for a new approach to household upkeep, you've come to the right place. In the next few minutes, we'll uncover hidden truths and surprising benefits, weaving together history, faith, and modern testimonies that bring this simple seasoning to life. Let's step into the past, explore the scripture, and glean wisdom from those who found transformative benefits in something as humble as a grain of salt. Section 1. Ancient Significance and Biblical Roots. In the annals of ancient history, salt was a treasure akin to precious metals. Roman soldiers sometimes received an allowance called a salarium, which translates to the modern word salary. This alone underscores how deeply salt was woven into the fabric of economic life. Merchants traveled hundreds of miles along salt roads to trade lumps of this valuable mineral. Communities near salt deposits often flourished, forming bustling trade centers. Without salt, food would spoil rapidly, leaving entire populations vulnerable to famine or disease. In many ways, salt kept civilizations alive. Yet, salt was more than a preservative or a form of currency. In spiritual circles, salt has long been seen as a purifier. Ancient cultures would sprinkle it on altars or sacred spaces to cleanse any lurking negative influences. Fast forward to the biblical era, and we find salt appearing in multiple significant passages. One of the most notable comes from the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus tells his followers, "You are the salt of the earth." At face value, it's a metaphor for moral preservation, an admonition to uphold goodness in a world prone to moral decay. But it also implies an act of seasoning life itself with compassion, truth, and faith. Much like salt draws out flavors, believers are called to highlight the goodness around them. Further back in the Old Testament, the prophet Elisha used salt to purify a corrupted spring, turning undrinkable water into a life-giving source. This extraordinary act wasn't about the salt performing a chemical miracle on its own, but symbolized God's intervention through something ordinary. It's an echo of how the divine can utilize basic, earthly elements to accomplish supernatural transformations. Another potent concept is the covenant of salt, mentioned in the book of Numbers and 2 Chronicles, signifying permanence and faithfulness. Salt, known for its durability, mirrored the unbreakable nature of divine covenants. Throughout Hebrew culture, mixing salt into sacrificial offerings was common. It represented a binding agreement, a sign that what was given to God was meant to last. Believers today sometimes draw a parallel. Just as salt preserves the physical, faith preserves the spiritual. There's a poetic resonance in the idea that salt's unchanging nature reflects the eternal promises of God. But these historical and scriptural references only scratch the surface of why salt remains a compelling symbol. For many people today, sprinkling salt in their living spaces carries a faint echo of these ancient rites, blending tangible actions with heartfelt belief. The deeper question is, does this ancient tradition hold any real power in the modern world, or is it simply a charming relic of the past? As we move forward, you'll see how age-old stories, biblical lessons, and personal testimonies weave together, suggesting that salt continues to serve as both a physical and spiritual purifier. However, ancient texts aren't the only source fueling salt's mystique. Everyday individuals, from diverse backgrounds, continue to share experiences that point to something bigger at work. Section 2. Spiritual Cleansing and Protective Rumors. Step into a typical household in various parts of the globe, and you may see a small bowl of salt by the front door or along the windowsills. Sometimes you'll spot lines of salt across thresholds or in hidden corners. These practices often stem from deeply rooted beliefs that salt forms an invisible barrier against any unwanted spiritual presence. Stories abound of families who scatter salt around each room after arguments, heartbreak, or illness, hoping to purify the lingering negativity. Others say they do so regularly as part of spiritual housekeeping, akin to dusting the furniture or vacuuming the carpet. A number of faith traditions emphasize that the act is less about the mineral itself and more about the faith behind it. By sprinkling salt, believers symbolically invite divine protection and cleansing. The grains become a physical sign of trust in a higher power's ability to cleanse minds and hearts, pushing away despair or malevolent forces. Yet, from a faith-based Christian perspective, some are quick to clarify that nowhere in Scripture does it explicitly command believers to sprinkle salt in their houses. Rather, these habits stem from the deeper symbolic meaning and historical usage of salt. When understood correctly, it can be a gentle reminder of God's power to purify, heal, and protect. Just as Elisha's salt purified bitter waters, many believe God can take the bitterness of life, our fears, anxieties, and burdens, and replace it with joy and peace. Salt is simply a tangible expression of that hope. Another reason these rituals persist is the testimony of countless individuals who claim to feel a genuine shift in the ambience of their homes. Some might describe it as lighter, calmer, or more grounded. While skeptics might label it as a placebo effect, believers respond that faith often works in tandem with symbolic acts. What matters is not that the salt magically repels negativity, but that it reminds us to lean into God's promises, seeking His covering for our living spaces. This is where the boundary between folklore and faith-based practice can blur. On the one hand, sprinkling salt can look like an echo of ancient superstition. On the other, it can be interpreted as a prayerful step of faith, almost like lighting a candle to signify hope or kneeling in prayer to demonstrate humility. Whichever way you approach it, the notion that a humble household staple might also function as a spiritual tool proves consistently captivating. And as we'll see next, the wonder of salt doesn't end with intangible or mystical results. There are countless practical reasons to scatter it around your home. Section 3. Household Benefits and Practical Magic. Salt isn't just a storybook talisman or a sacred emblem from Scripture. It's also an indispensable ally in day-to-day life. Before the age of chemical cleaning solutions, many families relied on salt to scour surfaces, freshen fabrics, and even disinfect wounds. While modern products might overshadow these basic uses, there's a growing interest in returning to simpler, more natural solutions. At the top of that list is our unassuming friend, salt. Surface cleaning and stain removal. Salt's abrasive texture helps lift stubborn residue from cookware or countertops. If you've ever burned food in a pot, sprinkling salt over the charred bits before scrubbing can make the job easier. Mixing salt with vinegar creates a mild, eco-friendly cleaning paste. This mixture can cut through grease on stovetops or remove caked-on food without resorting to harsh chemicals. Not only does this protect sensitive skin, but it also reduces the environmental impact of household chores. Odor absorption. Nothing's worse than lingering smells that refuse to leave. Whether it's garlic on your cutting board or stale odors in your fridge, a bit of salt can come to the rescue. Some people place small bowls of salt in corners, on windowsills, or even in the refrigerator. The belief is that salt crystals can absorb unpleasant scents, leaving the air fresher. While scientific evidence on this might be mixed, stories abound, and it certainly won't hurt to try, especially if you prefer minimalistic, chemical-free strategies. Moisture control. In damp or humid climates, moisture can accumulate, leading to mold or mildew growth. Sprinkling salt along windowsills or placing it in little dishes can help draw out some of that excess moisture, reducing musty smells and potential mold issues. Many also swear by a homemade salt sachet tucked into corners of closets or placed in the bathroom to keep humidity in check. While it's no replacement for a dehumidifier, it can act as a small-scale measure to preserve a fresher atmosphere. Laundry aid. Got a stubborn stain on your favorite shirt? Some folks pre-treat fabric stains with a salt and water paste before laundering. Others add salt to the wash cycle to help keep colors bright and reduce dye running in new garments. These old-school techniques have been passed down through generations, often overshadowed by modern detergents, but still surprisingly effective. By harnessing salt's natural properties, you might find your clothes looking cleaner without relying on additional chemicals. All of these practical uses echo salt's biblical role of preservation. Just as it prevented ancient people's food from spoiling, salt can help preserve the cleanliness and freshness of your home. Whether you lean on these everyday tips out of necessity or curiosity, you'll likely find that salt is a budget-friendly tool that rivals commercial alternatives. Yet, the story doesn't stop with ancient rituals or cleaning hacks. Salt's prominence in cultural customs extends across continents, each region offering its own take on why salt matters. Some of these traditions have spiritual undertones, others revolve around luck or superstition, and still others are simply about hospitality. Let's dive into these global viewpoints to see how salt unites people in fascinating ways. Section 4. Worldwide superstitions and cultural angles. Salt's symbolism crosses religious boundaries and cultural lines. In parts of Eastern Europe, for instance, it's common to greet guests with bread and salt, a gesture of hospitality and goodwill that stretches back centuries. The offering says, "May you never lack the necessities of life," tying the practicality of salt to a heartfelt blessing. Meanwhile, in East Asia, salt features in purification ceremonies. After attending a funeral in Japan, it's traditional to sprinkle salt on yourself before entering your home, said to cleanse any negative energies. Cultural historians trace this to Shinto beliefs, where purity is paramount and salt is thought to drive away evil spirits. In the Middle East, salt is sometimes laid out in lines across thresholds, a nod to the idea that malevolent forces cannot cross a boundary protected by salt. The specifics vary, but the underlying message is consistent. Salt forms a barrier between what's sacred or safe and what's harmful or unwanted. Of course, there's the well-known custom of throwing a pinch of salt over your shoulder if you spill it. Many trace this back to medieval Europe, where salt was expensive and precious. Spilling it was believed to invite bad luck or demonic forces. By tossing salt over the left shoulder, one symbolically blinds or wards off any evil that might be lurking. Though in modern times this might seem like a silly superstition, plenty of people still practice it, even if they're not entirely certain why. Beyond superstition, salt also ties into cultural expressions of unity and peace. In various African communities, for example, salt is exchanged during conflict resolution sessions. The parties taste salt together to signify they have a shared understanding of life's essence and vow to move forward in harmony. In the biblical tradition of the Middle East, sharing salt at meals was a way to forge or reaffirm covenant relationships, elevating an ordinary meal into a sacred rite of friendship or alliance. Despite the differences in execution, these customs highlight a universal human desire for safety, connection, and well-being. Whether it's to keep misfortune away, show hospitality, or represent a solemn vow, salt serves as a physical representation of intangible values. This widespread presence across cultures points to something inherently powerful about salt. Beyond mere superstition, it resonates on a deeper level, tapping into human longing for purity, preservation, and divine favor. As intriguing as these global practices are, we must circle back to the faith perspective. While many of these cultural uses aren't directly rooted in biblical instruction, they often parallel core spiritual themes found in Christianity and other faith traditions. When woven together, a picture emerges of salt as a universal emblem, something that can be deeply personal yet universally recognizable. So let's pivot back towards scripture and faith-based stories, exploring modern testimonies of how salt continues to remind people of transformation and grace. Section 5. Biblical reassurance and personal transformations. Scripture is filled with instances where God uses ordinary elements to convey extraordinary truths. Oil, water, bread, and wine all become symbols pointing to spiritual realities. Salt is no exception. We've already mentioned stories like Elisha purifying water with salt and Jesus calling his followers the salt of the earth. But the deeper resonance comes from seeing these references as a continuous thread that symbolizes God's ability to take something familiar and elevate it to a medium of blessing. The covenant of salt offers a compelling glimpse into this notion. Referenced in Numbers 18:19 and 2 Chronicles 13:5, it signifies an irrevocable and enduring promise. Salt, known chemically for its stability, becomes a metaphor for God's unwavering faithfulness. It's as if the Bible is saying, just as salt won't break down easily, neither will the promises of the Almighty. In a world where commitments are often treated casually, This symbolism can be both comforting and convicting. Many believers who sprinkle salt in their homes do so with that intention in mind, quietly affirming they stand under a promise that cannot be shaken. Let's explore some personal testimonies. Perhaps some of the most persuasive pieces of evidence for salt's ongoing significance come from personal stories. Countless individuals claim that they felt a shift in their household after adopting salt-related customs. Some recount a dramatic drop in tension or discord among family members. Others speak of a lingering heaviness that lifted once they prayerfully sprinkled salt in each room, asking God to cleanse the emotional and spiritual environment. One family tells of how they had recurrent nightmares and sleepless nights, suspecting a pervasive negativity in their home. After reading about salt's biblical symbolism, they decided to walk through each room, sprinkling small amounts of salt while praying for God's peace to fill every corner. They reported that the nightmares subsided and a sense of calm took root. Were these outcomes purely psychological, or did something genuinely shift in the spiritual realm? For them, the results felt tangible. Another testimonial highlights the practice of placing salt near doors and windows. A young mother, troubled by constant arguments in her household, decided to try it. She wasn't entirely convinced at first, but admitted she was desperate for positive change. Over time, she noticed fewer heated exchanges and more open communication among family members. While this doesn't guarantee salt is the magical cure-all, she and many others interpret these improvements as an answer to prayer, in which salt serves as a timely reminder of God's power to preserve harmony. Critics might argue these practices veer close to superstition, or that they oversimplify faith into a series of rituals. But those who embrace them often clarify they don't place their ultimate trust in salt. Rather, they see it as a simple, concrete expression that aligns the home with spiritual truths. By deliberately sprinkling salt, they're making a statement of faith, one that draws their hearts and minds back to God's promises. In this way, salt becomes more than a tradition. It's a catalyst for transformation. Much like taking communion isn't about the bread and the cup alone, but about remembering Christ's sacrifice. Sprinkling salt isn't about the mineral itself, but about calling to mind the unstoppable grace and love of God. For many, the practice fosters a spirit of reverence, reflection, and unity. And in a world full of chaos, such grounding acts can be invaluable reminders of hope. Of course, each person's journey will differ. Some might incorporate salt sprinkling into their regular spiritual routines, while others might find other practices more meaningful. The beauty of these personal transformations is that they illustrate how something as ordinary as salt can become an extraordinary faith builder. And that brings us to our final reflection, a synthesis of everything we've explored so far, aiming to leave you both informed and uplifted. Conclusion and final encouragement. When you hold a grain of salt in your hand, you're touching a substance that has traversed millennia of human history. Kings once hoarded it, explorers sailed uncharted waters in search of it, and prophets used it to demonstrate the power of God. Salt has served as a bridge between the physical and spiritual realms, preserving food on one hand and preserving faith on the other. From the Bible's covenant of salt to cultural customs spanning the globe, it stands as a testament to humanity's quest for purity, protection, and divine connection. So does sprinkling salt in your home truly change anything? At the practical level, it can certainly help eliminate odors, combat moisture, and maybe even freshen the energy in your living space. From a spiritual angle, it provides a tangible way to recall scriptural lessons about preservation, transformation, and unwavering promises. Whether or not you believe salt repels negativity or influences your surroundings at a supernatural level, it undeniably carries a rich windows of meaning. For those intrigued by the faith dimension, sprinkling salt can be a small but significant gesture, a daily reminder that God's grace can permeate every corner of your life. It's not the salt itself that wields power, but the faith behind it, guided by a creator who promised never to abandon his children. If we view salt as an emblem, one that points to steadfast devotion and the potential for radical change, then perhaps it does hold the capacity to transform our perspective and habits. In a fast-paced world overloaded with digital distractions, sometimes it's these simple, almost ancient practices that help us pause and reconnect with what's truly important. It might feel odd to scatter salt in a doorway or keep a small dish of crystals on a windowsill. Yet if it reminds us to pray for our household, seek peace with family members, or invite God's presence into our everyday routines, then it's worth considering. Ultimately, the beauty of salt lies in its versatility. It can season a dish, cleanse a room, symbolize faith, and serve as a conversation starter about deeper matters of the heart. The next time you reach for the salt shaker, whether to flavor a meal or freshen the air, remember that you're handling a substance brimming with history and spiritual resonance. In a single crystal, centuries of tradition, countless cultural rites, and timeless biblical truths converge. If you feel inspired to try sprinkling salt in your house, do so with intention. Speak blessings over each room, inviting peace and unity to thrive. Remember the stories of Elisha's purified water, Jesus' call to be salt of the earth, and the unyielding nature of covenant promises. Let these stories encourage you in moments of doubt or difficulty, reminding you that just as salt can preserve and purify, so can the divine hand restore and protect. And if you discover renewed harmony or a fresher spiritual atmosphere along the way, consider it a graceful testament to how God often uses small, humble gestures to accomplish profound change in our lives. No matter your background or beliefs, there's value in stopping to reflect on the deeper meanings behind everyday objects. Whether you fully embrace salt's symbolic power or simply appreciate its household benefits, you now know there's far more packed into those tiny grains than meets the eye. Take a moment to let that sink in, because sometimes life's most impactful lessons come from the simplest sources we've overlooked until we pause long enough to see them in a new light. May your home be filled with tranquility, your spirit enriched by fresh insights, and your faith grounded in the timeless promise that you are cared for, body and soul. And may salt serve as a gentle reminder of the incredible ways God can work through even the most commonplace elements of our world. Feel free to like and subscribe to this channel to stay connected to more faith-based content that will enrich your mind and uplift your soul. God bless you.